Welcome to another episode of Ex-Vicarious. I'm Braith, and today I'm joined by Leo, Roubos, and Finnlay Morcombe. Yep, this is our first double header, and they're tuning in from Melbourne this afternoon. So, along with Oliver Farnill, they've been building Fluency. Why is it called Fluency? Well, you know all those boring business admin tasks like managing payments in Xero or adding a user in HubSpot? Their AI-powered software will screen record you manually performing each step and then transform it into a clear how-to document for employees to follow when completing a new task. In other words, Fluency speaks your business language fluently so you don't have to manually explain it. Now, Finn is the co-founder and CEO, while Leo is the head of growth. But before becoming a founder, Finn was actually on the path to becoming an investment banker. And before diving into the world of startups, Leo was previously doing sales for giants including Agoda, Deliveroo, and Kogan. Anything I've missed before we jump into the questions, boys?
Well, that's pretty much it. It's like good pitch. Yeah, for a lot. It's beautiful.
I
You have a
appreciate it.
great
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll dive straight into it then. Yo, by the way, if you're new here, let me quickly tell you why I even do this podcast. In one sentence, it's because I believe life is wasted if you're not doing everything you can to make your wildest dreams come true. This often means going against the crowd, taking unconventional career paths, and building the mindset that makes you a millionaire, Olympian, red carpet actor, or even the queen of a food empire. Those are the exact people I interview so that you can learn from them and turn your own wildest dreams into reality. If you're a regular listener of Ex-Vicarious, it'll help me a ton if you like, subscribe, or share this round. So thanks for being here. Let's get back to this week's guest. So Finn, how did Fluency come about?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was working in finance prior to this. I did a stint in investment banking and before that, a stint in superannuation. When I was in super, I was in the data analysis role. That was kind of like half software engineering, like data science sort of stuff. The other half was market facing operations sort of stuff. And in that role, I had to move like a reporting function from one team into the team I was working in. And this reporting function was like 45 minutes to complete, 800 steps or so, touched 20 Excel spreadsheets, like data warehouses, 4 levels of stakeholder approval. This report basically showed like where the super company's exposure to a given asset, whether it was fixed income, equity, infrastructure, sort of something rather. And that needed to be done every day. If they went over like a certain exposure threshold, then they had to sell down or remove themselves from the board, whatever. And actually having to first understand how this process was done was so painful. It was just the worst shit. I've like one of the worst things I've had to go through, like in my shorter working career. I had to sit down with like 5 different people, try and get them to explain to me what happened, then ask, "Oh, can you please like just write the steps out?" So I wrote the steps, but steps without images of where to click and what is being clicked on is hard, super contextless. There was distributed documentation covering some parts of it. In some people's like calendar events, Confluence, SharePoint, Word, and it stuck. Then eventually this task actually, everyone decided, all right, this is probably too hard. And they got consultants in to come down, sit down with everyone and actually write all of this stuff themselves. And that would cost an employee like 4 hours of their workday each across a team of 15, 16. And I just thought, oh, this has got to be a common problem. There's got to be such an easy way to solve this. And that's where I had the idea for Fluency.
Yeah, that's awesome. And before we dive into your own background a little bit, wanted to jump to Leo and just ask you how the opportunity to join Fluency actually arose and what made you go for it.
Yeah, for sure. I was working in AWS consulting in the sales and marketing side of things. And since Fluency's built on AWS, Finn and I have been friends for a while. I guess I was the first person that came to mind when they were looking for AWS consulting. And after I heard about the idea, I thought it was, pretty incredible. I thought they were really onto something, but they were still sort of in the early stages. So I basically said, as soon as you guys are ready to start selling this thing, like put my hand up, like let's do it. And that happened around the start of this year. I joined full time and then basically got us ready for a full go-to-market launch around May this year. And ever since then, it's been off to the races, really.
Yeah, so before joining, had you been involved with startups before?
I'd always wanted to be. And honestly, when I got the job at the AWS consultancy and I was applying for a few others, I was only looking for startups. And even though the AWS consultancy wasn't a startup, it was a small company. I was the first account executive and got to build a lot of the go-to-market with the leadership team. So I kind of got that pseudo startup experience, and I wanted more. I think kind of always wanted to have my own thing, and this was pretty much as good as it was going to get. Like seeing these two had already come up with this awesome idea, built out the MVP. I was like, the timing is perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. And so the other thing I noticed is that both of you kind of moved from more corporate to startup environments. So how has your perceptions of the world changed in terms of what's possible when you've been working in these two different types of worlds?
I started with Hester, which is a fairly large company. I think they have 500 heads and it's very cooperative. There's a very defined structure. When I was
Yeah.
at investment banking, I was at a mid-market investment bank. So I think around 40 heads there. And that was definitely a lot. I mean, still very cooperative, but in terms of like the hierarchy and how that business was run, it was definitely less structured. And then moving to
Mm.
startups, I mean, it's kind of the ultimate lack of structure simulator. And in terms of how it's kind of shaped my view of the world, I've probably always been like somewhat delusional in like self-belief in terms of being able to get things done. But it's just kind of added a bit of like, I guess, validation to that a little bit. We have
Yeah.
so much further to go. But even like getting to this point, Ollie and I the other day were looking at the goals that we wrote down like 11 months ago. And most of them have either been hit or exceeded. And I remember when we wrote them, we're like, nah, there's no way this is going to happen. Yeah, let's just get them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like to me, the biggest thing is it's like a hyperbolic time chamber. When you're so engrossed in something and it kind of just becomes what you're singularly focused on and you end up like pulling big hours to make it happen, it ends up being super, super satisfying because you can get so much more done instead of if
Mm.
you're, purely focused on a big corporate job where you rock up at 9 on the dot and leave at 4:50 to get the train. I don't know. It just feels like your days are shorter and your time flies by. Whereas here, it feels like you literally get more out of the day because you're so focused in. And I think that's like the best
Yeah.
thing at a super early startup.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great to hear. And I just wanted to go back to Finn, how you mentioned you guys have destroyed your goals that you put
So
11 months ago. Yeah, yeah. Well, kind of the ones that you have, exceeded.
yeah.
What do you think has helped you exceed them? Were there things you were doing monthly or daily to remind yourself how to go about it? Or was it more long-term thinking that helped you achieve those?
I mean, with those goals I referenced, it was kind of, we had like a mentor at the time who said you should write down your goals so you can look back at them. And like at that time, the business was established. Yeah, we'd been established for like 3 months or so, but like really, really for the corporate structure. There was no formal rigor or framework around these goals. It was really it was actually like a dream. Like the document is like
Mm,
2022 dreams or something like that.
yeah.
So I guess just driving forward and we kind of somehow managed to do it. I mean, now internally it becomes more structured, like goal setting framework and all that sort of stuff. But for those ones, it was more a dream. And then we got there by just like working very hard and making sure we work with the best people to get it done. Because like at the end of the day, it is a team effort. Like everyone part of Fluency has helped us get to those goals. I couldn't have done
Yeah.
it. Yeah. I feel like sometimes with the
Yeah.
goals,
Yeah.
you like set them and then you start doing it, you get so lost in it that you almost forget what you were doing. And then you take a step back and you're like, oh, we planned to do that.
Yeah.
Like that was the goal all along. Like, and you almost forgot about it, When you're writing code for like 17 hours a day, the source is very deep. You can get very lost in it.
Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of like writing code, for example, and those long hours that you guys do you guys ever stay in the office overnight? How does that work? Like, because obviously you're a close team as well. How does on days where you guys are really locked in and you're like, okay, we can finish this today. Let's hit it out. How does it sort of work?
Yeah. Well, it kind of depends on like the team's lifestyle and stuff. I mean, some people like will go home at like 7 or so, but will work quite late. For those really nuts
Mm,
ones, I mean, just recently we did a massive product overhaul. So the dev team
yeah.
pretty much ran 2 a.m. every single day. We haven't slept in the office
Right.
too much. I was living in Frankston a couple of months ago before I moved up here. And then I was sleeping in the office. I was sleeping in hostels. I was just chaping it as much as possible. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the office has been a lovely abode on occasion.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask, in terms of the startup culture in Melbourne, how would you guys rate that and the sort of support you may have gotten from, I know you mentioned Mentor before, or potentially other startup founders, around the same age or same environment? How would you sort of rate that culture?
Yeah, I think it's something that Melbourne has a lot of potential for, but it's still in its early stages. There are some people that are absolute gems that you meet. Be like, wow, you are actually
Mm,
pushing like this whole ecosystem forward. But I still think there's a long way to go. I guess I think like everyone in the startup community in Melbourne needs to sort of feel like they are pushing towards that ecosystem, and it needs to be a bit more of a shared goal. I think but yeah, there are some people that are really leading the charge. Yeah, for sure. I think I agree with Leo. There's definitely a lot of room to grow. We've been lucky. Went through the Swinburne Accelerator program. Had great support from RMIT, which is the uni I went to. And so we've been somewhat around the events there, met a few other startups around our age, around our sort of traction level. But I think in terms of, slightly off topic, but Sydney seems to be where it's really happening. Like shout out Andy Liao from Build Club. I've been up there a few times
Yeah.
with those guys, and that seems to be building like a super, super awesome community. Like it's AI focused, but that is definitely just being a magnet for all sorts of startups around that sort of hub community that's growing there. And I know there's different branches, like globally now, there's one in Melbourne, but being in the Sydney one, it's amazing. Yeah, yeah. We basically need more like build clubs, more people like Annie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, shout out Build Club and Annie. They had their Anyone Can AI event on the weekend, and I went to that and did a bit of content there as well. So that will be coming out soon. But yeah, yeah, it's, I mean, through Ethan, who I had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, is actually, how I met you guys. So
Shout out Nathan as well. Another
definitely,
G.
for sure. Shout out Ethan. I mean, the whole Build Club ecosystem is awesome. So yeah, but going back to that Swinburne accelerator that you mentioned, could you just shed a little bit of light about the whole experience? Being in uni and coming up with ideas, with your peers, and just how it felt, being quite young at that time, to create something that you knew could become really big.
So how was the experience? Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
First, we did the Swinburne pre-accelerator when we had an MVP, but I wouldn't even call it that. It was basically this shitty, terrible, terrible algorithm that pointed to one file directory and could watch changes. We went
Right.
through the pre-accelerator, and that was great in terms of just like meeting other people who are trying to push towards building something. And we had the pre-accelerator pitch night. We run best pitch and runners up to something else, which was fantastic, and actually opened up quite a few doors. Met Mark, who's one of the directors now at Fluency, through that program. And he's been great in terms of providing mentorship around like general business direction, governance, rating. So shout out Mark as well. After the pre-accelerator, we went into the Swinburne accelerator. We basically applied again, I think it was 3 months after the pre-accelerator. And for some reason in that 3 month period, the product like massively accelerated into something just sellable, or at least you could somewhat consider sellable. And we were lucky enough to get in. We were the youngest people there. And that was really good because the businesses in the accelerator, especially some of them, are super progressed. Some of them are doing like 7 figures in revenue every year already. And that was really good to
Yeah.
kind of see what could be, what needed to happen to have those things happen, and just like common potholes to avoid. And of course, I mean, the 20K equity free was also great. But all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff, the community, the people we met, I think was more important.
Yeah, so I think for other university students who may want to become a founder or entrepreneur, would you recommend just, contacting whatever their startup hub may be, or trying to get into their uni accelerators?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, why not? There's no downside except for maybe the hour, 90 minutes it takes for you to do the application.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So I wanted to go and talk a little bit about your team now. So obviously, you have quite a young team, all around, mid 20s. So what would you say that has been the biggest advantage of having this very close knit team, but also the biggest challenges?
Do you want to speak to first? We've got some good insight as well. Yeah, for sure. I mean, challenges to start with is obviously going to be experience. I think if you're going to have people this young, they need to be like sponges for learning. Otherwise, it's just going to be an inexperienced team running around, and you need to have people that are highly compatible in terms of where their skill sets lie. I feel like everyone here brings unique experiences to the table, and there's very little overlap. So it's kind of perfect. We'll, like
Yeah.
sales, product, business, engineering, and it all sits together really well. So I think you need to find people that work compatibly like that. And then I think also having the right people around you from like a mentorship perspective, someone like a Mark who is a bit more experienced, who can make sure that we don't run into potholes as young people. But I think there's no better time than when you're young to dive into something like this, because you don't have mortgages and kids to worry about. So there's a lot more,
Yeah.
I guess, risk appetite. But I think people of any age can do it, right? So
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, going back to the advantages, would you say that you guys feel a lot more connected because there's a lot more things to relate on. And when it comes to building that team, I know you mentioned, everyone sort of has a different expertise, but in terms of what links you guys all together, what would you say that is?
I think there's a few things. I mean, everyone here definitely is like aligned on the vision. We all have like some slightly like different ideas in the semantics, but in terms of where we want to be, what the product wants to look like, where the business wants to be, everyone in the business, whether it's Mark or Kenny, one of our devs, our only dev, shout out Kenny, James, our new sales hire, shout out James as well, Leah, everyone here, we're definitely all pushing towards
Yeah.
the same vision, which is, that's kind of like the ageless sort of like connection pool, I'd say. And then outside of that,
Mm,
and it's good being the same age because humor is also the same. We definitely laugh a fair bit as a company, which is great. And yeah, so just two things.
I think going forward, like we probably, I mean, I can't speak for him, but we don't want to be like just a Gen Z team forever where it's a bunch of young people. We are looking to add a little
Yeah.
bit more like diversity of age and experience over time as we mature as a company as well. So yeah, definitely not just going to be Gen Z forever.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, I feel like even with the hiring, it wasn't even, we were deliberately hiring young 20-somethings, like mid-20s.
Yeah.
It just kind of, it just happened to be happenstance. I mean, it's just like they were the best fits for the role. And it was like, oh, well, there's a bit of a personality / culture fit there to it.
And if you're a startup as well, right, you probably don't have the budget for insane, like 20-year experience, senior executive hires or anything crazy. You typically are looking more around the junior to mid-level. So it kind of ends up in that age range necessarily. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talking more about the investment side of things, what do you think, whether it has been pitches in the accelerator or outside of that, what do you think has helped you guys get people to invest in you or want to, have conversations about helping in some way?
I mean, what helped to get investors interested in our pre-seed round at least was we were super lucky to have that mentor who, his name's Mark, as I spoke about him previously. He has a small cap asset management fund. So he's been on the buy side of so many like venture capital transactions, and he's also aided other startups in the past. So he kind of intimately knew the process, both from the startup's perspective and the investor's perspective. From there, he helped us shape like an investment strategy around it. Like we had a plan, we knew what we wanted, what we didn't want, what we thought needed to happen in order to get that investment across the line. I mean, and that really helped to make us attractive because we had a professional process, like as a really early stage company, which I think helped like quell any doubts because of our age and inexperience around that stuff. And then on the other side as well, and equally, if probably more important, maybe I should have led with this, is the fact that, I mean, we demonstrated in very quick time, good amount of traction. We had a product that we built ourselves that worked, that was already seeing value in the market. And, we had like a decent pipeline of deal flow that we've managed to generate in that short period of time. So I think like all those things in conjunction was really good. But I think the absolute icing on the cake was that ability to have a strategy set by someone who knew the process inside and out. And it just made it like, I've spoken to other founders about their raise processes, whether pre-seed, Series A, seed, and we were super lucky. Like it was a pretty smooth investment round.
And also that helps us knowing like what we want as well.
Yeah.
So we also know on the other side, what we're looking for is a culture fit from an investment perspective, especially if someone's going to come on as a big potential investor. It needs to work for both parties. Yeah. So when we look back at like the pre-seed investors, some of those people have been instrumental to the company's early success.
Absolutely.
Making sure that we have that same lens when we go into the seed. So we end up with people that we want to work with in the long run that could provide value as well, whether it's strategic, introduction, whatever. I think knowing what we want has helped a lot as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So before we delve into your personal stories a bit more, I just wanted to ask, is there anything about Fluency that you wanted to tell listeners or any ways that they could get in contact?
I mean, like the best sort of things that people can do to help us outside of using the product and, giving us feedback, if it's suitable for your role, is like those introductions into businesses with big operations teams, big middle office, big back office teams. And like ultimately facilitating the introduction into somebody who could champion us into the org.
Yeah.
Like that is the number one thing that would be helpful. Outside of that, I mean, like trying to use the product, telling us that this sucks about it or the login flow needs work. I mean, those things are sort of worth their weight in gold because often people either like you and they don't want to tell you that this thing sucks. So like, it's fine. It's good. There's nothing actionable about that. I think for me, those are the two most useful things. But
Yeah, definitely. And what they would want to see as well. Even this morning, we had a really productive conversation with someone who would be a future user of where we're heading, and knowing like what about our roadmap in particular, how that should be shaped is so useful for us. We're really trying to get closer and closer to that customer feedback loop, especially recently, because otherwise you're just building into the board. So you have to manage like your vision and what customers want. So yeah, people can help us with customer feedback for sure.
Yeah, so the people who want to give a little bit of feedback or make some intros, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you guys?
Reach out to others on LinkedIn, or if you want to see a demo or anything like that, or even want to get started, you can go straight to the Fluency website. But if you want to reach out to any of us directly, messages are always open.
they are.
Yep. All right, perfect. So now you guys can answer this, whoever wants to go first, one by one, each question. So usually I ask, my guests about their biggest dreams and everything. So I've never done two at a time, but yeah, we could just go each question. You guys could just go one after another. So the first one is, what's the earliest dream of yours that has stayed with you to this day?
I think for me, I never had like a defined what it was, but I always wanted to do something impossible, something great. I guess I could say from a young age, I didn't always used to be like super hardworking. I was very like my vector of interest was kind of like maximizing the amount of fun per minute. But even like amongst like my childhood through high school and the early stages of uni to now, I wanted to do something like impossible and do something great with it. I guess that's kind of the best way to put that.
Yeah, awesome.
I guess I always just kind of wanted to do something as well, and I figured it was always going to be a business. It's like a stupid analogy, but having like a Wikipedia page with no picture. I don't want to be like a big famous person, but I want to do something. And I think this sort of role where it's like getting behind someone else's vision and playing a big part, I think that's the sort of thing that I'm built for. Not necessarily to be like the front runner on the TV or whatever, on the front of the magazine, but sort of being in that core team. So I think it's pretty in line with what I always wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So Finn, you mentioned maximizing the amount of fun per minute. I love the way you worded that. So could you give some examples of how that evolved as you got older?
For sure. I mean, I don't know if my frame of mind is kind of this maximizing fun per minute anymore, but I can tell you how it evolved. I mean, like when I was a kid, like I loved skateboarding, still love skateboarding, used to love sports, mountain biking. And for me, that was the most fun. So I would just try and do everything, shape my life around that as much as possible, getting as much exposure to the sport whilst doing it, watching it, talking about it with friends, creating content back in the day. And then I guess that's kind of shaped into Fluency now. I'm still very obsessive as a person. I was obsessed about those hobbies at the time. And now Fluency is that obsession. And it's just great because Fluency is something that supports me and it's able to support that dream as well. Like skateboarding, mountain biking, all of those sort of like little hobbies, whilst really fun and great at the time. Not always the most productive things to be doing and can be quite distracting from things your parents want you to care about, pests, homework, school. Yeah, here we are now.
Yeah. So two things I wanted to follow up from. First of all, the content one. Do you still have any accounts where we can see, skateboarding vids?
If you can find them.
Yeah, right. So you don't want to plug them?
These are like 10 years old now. It's more mountain biking. There's a mountain biking website with a bunch of content on it out there. Happy to plug it, I suppose, but it's
a dusty corner sort of spec.
Right. Okay. Well, if I find it, I'll let audiences know as well.
It's findable.
And just going back to, all right. But yeah, going back to what you said about you just wanted to do something impossible. I personally resonate with that a lot, but I was just interested in how that sort of thinking came about. Like what made you as a child or just while you were younger always want to do something that everyone else thought was impossible?
Well, to be honest, I mean, as a child, it was more kind of like a feeling, because whilst I was like doing all this fun stuff, I always was like, there's like at some point something will change, or like it will just be easy, or it'll fall into my lap. And then you kind of get older and you go, oh, you kind of have to make things happen, and then it kind of evolves from there. I guess it just comes down to being proud of yourself. Just doing something that can either change the world or help other people, as kind of cringe and normative as that sort of like saying is. Like, I feel like everybody wants to do that to some certain extent, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. And So Leo, going back to the Wikipedia page with no picture, and that's kind of like the way to sum up what you want to achieve. Like something that everyone kind of knows about, will be searching of, but don't necessarily have to be the face of it. Is that kind of what you meant by it?
Yeah, sort of just like, not famous, but contributing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, is there a particular reason why you don't want the fame?
Just, I guess I've never been like, I was like as a kid, I wasn't like that or anything like that. And definitely when it comes to like entrepreneurship, I'm not really an ideas guy. So I always knew I wasn't going to come up with a great
Mm.
idea. But as soon as there was a great idea, I guess I assumed I was just going to find it and everything was going to fall together. But it's sort of like Finn says as well, nothing just falls in your lap. You have to pretty much go out and get it. And you have to be putting yourselves in all these situations to,
Mm.
Embracing the surface area of life.
Yeah.
That's it. Is directly attributed to hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And yeah, it's just really interesting to see, I guess, those early streams and how it's kind of brought you guys to the path here today, and being able to work together really well, and as you said before, like fit together perfectly. In terms of barriers, I wanted to ask, earlier on in life, what prevented you from taking action on stuff that you feel like could have fulfilled your biggest goals or your biggest dreams? Were there ever any internal barriers, such as worrying about what the other people think, or potentially external barriers?
I mean, I guess I always had that kind of dream we just talked about, but my number one priority was maximizing the amount of fun. You had it every minute. So I suppose that was a blocker. And then, like, I don't know, being a teenager, I wasn't the most proactive kid in terms of this sort of stuff. So just the normal things, I suppose.
I feel like as far as Finn goes, like
Yeah.
when he's dreaming, there's no barriers to him. Like I feel like he's got pretty lofty ambitions at all times. It's just basically.
There's no need for negativity. It's only a net negative. I don't see any reason for it.
Yeah. So, what do you think made you take that step to be like, okay, obviously, maximizing fun is very enjoyable, but what actually got you past that line to being like, okay, I want to be quite serious with this. I want to actually make a huge impact on others as well, not just having fun myself. Can you describe that moment that it kind of switched?
Yeah, for sure. It actually was like somewhat visceral. There was like a certain period 4 years ago now where I was just kind of getting bored with my life at the time. Like, there was nothing wrong with it. I was studying, I was working part-time. I was enjoying my hobbies, gym, running, skateboarding, hanging out with friends. There was nothing wrong with that. And I just started to get extremely, extremely bored. And I was lucky enough that Ollie as well kind of was exhibiting, I guess, the same symptoms of what we considered boring. And so there was a period of fluency where we were both like, all right, we're learning to code at all costs. And so we just like chill out in his basement for like 12 hours, try and, I don't know, write some like ghetto software that barely worked, or learn about like random topics, try and create random businesses. It really just switched from like that fun to just like, how much can we learn? And then it kind of became another sort of obsession, like how much what is physically possible? Like how much can we actually absorb, create, do in a certain like X period of time? And that's kind of, I think, where that shift changed. We tried all sorts of things. The number one recurring theme was like software engineering. We both realized, damn, this is really fun. We probably should have studied comp sci or something at uni. And because neither of us did, but it was fine in the end because now you can write software.
Mm. Yeah, Leo, before I go back to the barriers for you, I did want to just ask Finn, what was the coolest thing you've coded, or with someone else even, that never became a business?
Nothing. The coolest thing I coded that became a business. I don't know. There's some of the old iterations of Fluency never saw the light of day, and I'm very glad they will never see the light of day.
Conplug.
Oh,
That's kind of, in a way.
Yeah, Conplug. I mean, that's the OG Fluency name, Confluence plugin, Conplug. And my girlfriend, she said, bro, that is such a bad name. It has some very interesting connotations. How about Fluency? Actually, it's just Nani. She's the one who came up with the name. I can't take any credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe someone out there who's listening may want to take Conplug and do something else with it.
Definitely.
So,
how are you just hacking?
Domain?
I don't want to be associated with that anymore.
Yeah,
the domain is probably available too.
Yeah, and then just in terms of, you said you guys didn't have that background in software development, but you just learned it yourself. What do you think helped you learn as quickly and efficiently as possible?
I mean, at the start, it certainly wasn't quick or efficient. And I feel like we quit. Well, not quit. We just like, I don't know, just like stopped learning it for periods at a time. Like, I feel like I kind of tried to learn it 3 or 4 times over the course of 9. There was no like at a certain point you finish learning it, but it did feel like there was this point of learning and it felt difficult to think in like a computational sort of way. Like, what is the code doing? What does this mean? What is recursion, etc. And then there was just like some sort of point where it goes, oh, I can kind of make, I feel like I could feasibly make anything now. Disregard code quality. I can kind of make it do anything now. And then once it did feel like there was some sort of baseline with software. And once you've hit that baseline, it does feel like you can kind of create any sort of thing, like given infinite time and stuff. And if you disregard like code quality and all those sort of domain-driven design, all those sorts of architecture principles, there did feel like there was a certain point where I was like, oh, okay, I can actually do this thing. Because like when you learn, you start with like tutorials or guides and it's like make a hangman game or something like super, super basic like that. And most software doesn't really revolve around that sort of thing. I mean, like we're in a world of web applications. Everything's, create a front end, create a back end, everything's API driven. And I feel like once you learn those sort of basics, whether you're a back end dude or a front end girl or a full stack developer, once you have those basics, it's just like a late pad. And the rate at which you can learn more concepts and more frameworks becomes quicker and quicker. Like your time to understanding on new languages, frameworks, whatever, just reduces massively.
Yeah. No, that's awesome to hear. Because for myself as well, I've tried, just throwing myself into a project, a certain goal, and then just forcing myself to learn. And what you mentioned about reaching that baseline, I don't think I've even come close to that baseline, but it's good to hear that, people who don't necessarily have that background, just by putting yourself in that position again and again, eventually you can reach that point where you can feel like anything
like
you
the
want to
projects.
create.
Oh yeah. Like to your point, the project thing, I reckon 95% of the software skills I've learned has been on the job, ergo fluency. Like I have 5% knowledge from not fluency and the rest of the 95% is through, oh my God, we promised this person a deadline. I've never, ever, ever done infrastructure as code or AWS before, but I need to get this out. And it was kind of like, it felt like we would drown if we didn't put it out.
Yeah. We've stopped promising deadlines.
Or as strict.
Yeah.
I still love to overpromise. Nah, I'm joking.
It used to be crazy. It used to be, that'll be out in a week. And it was like, oh, we cannot do that in a week. Definitely chilling out.
Do you think that's just made you guys, do you think by doing that, it's made you guys like just work quicker? Like every time you've overpromised a deadline, then you're like, we have to figure out a way.
Definitely been that.
It's the best one.
It is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. I love that. Just wanted to go back to Leo now in terms of the barriers. What do you think there have been any barriers for you early on in life that have prevented you from, just focusing on that goal, being able to really help grow or, through sales, help someone take an idea and take it to the next level? Has there ever been barriers for you putting yourself in that position, whether it's internal or external?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess it is about knowing like the role that you have to play. I think when you're in those aimless years of 18 to 22 and you're trying to work out what it is you want to do, and you do feel like you are somewhat, I guess, entrepreneurial or ambitious or startup leaning, you can lean towards, I'm going to be this guy that comes up with the idea and I'm going to start my own thing. And then you can get sort of frustrated when you go, what next? You don't have an idea. You don't know how to code. And then you sort of end up like in this abyss of, I don't know, what next? And you kind of get taken through the tides of the corporate world. So I guess that was probably the big barrier. I guess in a lot of ways, I was lucky that this came along and it was so in line with what I felt was right for me. Because if this didn't come along, I probably would have ended up at another startup somewhere, but I could have also just as easily ended up beating myself up, being like, oh, why don't I have any idea? So I guess it's about thinking deeply about what exactly you want to do and then getting yourself out there. Like that's the biggest thing that I would recommend to people that feel like they want to do startups, or maybe even they feel like they want to start a startup and they don't know where to begin. Just join one, especially a really early stage one. You'll get all the experience, and if you love it so much, you can do your own thing as well after that if you liked it. And if it went well, you probably got so much experience and scratched that itch anyway that, it becomes your thing as well after a while, especially if you're early and everyone gets so bought in. So it scratches that same itch really. the little room in the frying pan.
Yeah.
The front end. Yeah.
Bunch of eggs and bacon, you guys. Yeah, chuck them on. In terms of your background in sales, Leo, was that quite intentional? Because for myself, I've come to realize that wanting to start companies or start podcasts, start a media brand, the sales aspect is so important, whether it's getting people to come on as guests or just having chats with people who could, in a way, help in a more business sense. For you, taking that career in sales, was it intentional in knowing that it would equip you to be very useful when it comes to going into startups? Or was it just out of, pure interest that you started, had that career in sales?
Sort of fell backwards into it. Like my initial thing was like, oh, I'm probably going to end up doing my own thing. Probably want to learn how to code. So I started at uni doing a Bachelor of Science, majoring in computer science. Pretty much ended under that like abyss, that project abyss. Was like, this isn't for me. Probably didn't push through hard enough. Gave up. Ended up doing psychology instead. And then during COVID, basically stumbled backwards into customer support, which turned into account management, which turned into account management upsell, which turned into account executive. Basically, like all that account management and account executive, I look back and I'm like, oh, I have all this sales experience. And especially like my last role, being the earliest member of the sales team, basically getting to build the go-to-market strategy alongside leadership. I felt like that gave me all the experience that I needed in a small company environment. And that's kind of how it ended up here. So it definitely wasn't planned from the beginning. I think a lot of salespeople, I hear from a lot of salespeople, they sort of fell backwards into it. Because you get those people that are a little bit,
right.
I guess, you often get people that are ambitious, but a little bit directionless. And it's like, okay, what can I do? Well, something fiery and passionate, selling. So hell yeah. I figure it out.
Yeah. So in that last role, sorry, yeah. In that last role, building that go-to-market strategy, what would you say was the most surprising thing you learned?
It's a very different sort of sales then. Like the biggest thing I learned, especially in a place like Melbourne, was the importance of relationships in enterprise sales and how much it's often about, I guess, like how you cultivate those relationships and become a bit more of a trusted advisor to people. This is like, that was consulting. This is like, I guess, more B2B SaaS. So it was a little bit different, but it still comes down to people buying from people. Like the product matters and is cool, but especially somewhere like Melbourne, when you're more selling, I guess, like transformational change and the high level impact of what you're doing, it comes down to like, do they trust you? Do you understand what their pain points are? And, half the time it's like, do you get along? So especially any decision maker, it's about that trust.
Yeah. Awesome to hear. I wanted to move on to the next one now. What's been most fulfilling to you guys about those dreams coming to fruition? Both being here at Fluency and being able to build the company from, the ground up. What's been the most fulfilling?
All of it, to be honest. I just love every single part, even the bad bits. That's like working with great people, getting to write code, getting to meet all these people with great careers from the selling perspective. As Leo said, like getting along with them, like formulating a relationship that's not just transactional. Everything, the marketing, just all of it, to be honest. Not the most exciting answer, but genuinely every little bit, even the late nights, something about them. It is fantastic. Like, there's no going back. And having more time, it honestly feels like you get more life because you really don't have much space for any of those like in-between moments of the things you're doing where you kind of like, I don't know, sit around on your phone and you kind of lays out. You have to like pack your day in, even if it's for stuff that isn't work related, like, exercise, whatever. So you literally get more hours out of the day, it feels. Sometimes out of sleep, but it just turns life into like a hyperbolic time chamber. And you sort of realize like how much you're wasting and screwing about. That's what I've enjoyed outside of just the pure like doing it. I mean, everyone's partner like loves it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so like obviously people love talking about work-life balance, but from what I've seen in startups and from what you guys have described, it's more like a work-life immersion. As you said, there's none of those moments where you go on your phone and waste time because you're actually excited about the next thing you can do to advance the company in some way or get closer to those goals. How do you guys manage the time outside of the company, just in your own personal lives? Do you put certain rules in place to, make sure you do X with, outside of Fluency, or is everything very intertwined?
I do like the work-life immersion phrase. I haven't heard that before. That's really good. I guess for me, it's more about like being okay with it. The only times where it ever goes badly is when I get frustrated, where I go, oh, shit, I've got no time for X, Y, Z because I've spent all this time on this. But at the end of the day, I chose to do this, and this is actually what I want to do. So just understanding and being okay with the fact that there are going to be other sacrifices instead of like internally kicking and screaming the whole way has been like the big thing for me, and still trying to get a bit of, exercise in, all that sort of stuff. And obviously time with partner is a massive one, but yeah, structuring is going to be a big thing, but just being okay with it as well, that there will be some things that go away a bit less, hanging out with friends at partying or whatever.
Yeah, probably similar to Leo. Don't really see too many differences between work and life. I mean, work is like a subset of life for 99.9% of people. And you've got the term, some people live to work, some people work to live. I don't know. I feel like for a lot of people in startups, founders, really early starters, it is, I guess, to that work-life immersion. Like, damn, I feel like my life is so good. Get to work, something I love, still find time to skate, still find time to hang with my family, friends, my partner. Like, yeah, I mean, those times are much more limited, but I feel like I just appreciate them way more. Like, oh, yes, sunny day, Wednesday, skate for an hour, and just love every minute of it, like savor every second. Yeah, to be honest. Yeah, no complaints. I don't know. What's the average screen time like on people's phones? There's plenty of time like to be had, but having something that demands all your time, it's like Finn says, it actually gets you to appreciate more than when you do have that time off. That it is like, okay, I get to spend, I don't know, this dinner, having dinner with my girlfriend. I get these hours, and these hours are a little bit more precious because they are more scarce. And after this, I do have to hop back on.
Yeah.
It's like just squeezing more out of it and being, I guess, more present with it all. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how it forces you to be present and also just naturally appreciate everything else a lot more. So it's awesome to hear.
Your journey. Yes.
What would you guys say is next? Yeah. What would you guys say is your major goals going into the next 12 months?
Next 12 months, I mean, there's definitely some quite ambitious revenue targets we want to hit. We know where the product wants to be. Well, obviously the market shapes it to some sort of degree, but we have like a clear idea in mind of what we want to achieve. And like both sides are super ambitious, but I feel like we have a plan to get there. There's probably going to be a capital raise announcement, likely somewhere in there as well. To be honest, like my opinion, capital raise, it's a necessary evil if you are the sort of company that wants to hit those really big numbers and wants to achieve something like super, super impressive. Less of like, I don't really want to try and see it as an achievement thing. Same with like hiring a big team. It's kind of like a distractor. It's like a false flag chief. Yeah. You can raise $1 million and hire 20 people and then lose your business in 6 months. Yeah. It's like trying to do more with less, I guess, is like one of our unwritten certain philosophies here at Fluency. But yeah, for me, the thing that excites me most is getting this into as many hands as possible. And honestly, like some of the features we want to create haven't really been done before. We're really keen to see if we can execute and get them done. We've gotten very granular with goals
awesome.
over the quarters as well. Yeah, I think before we were all just pushing and going for it. And one great thing that Kenny, I guess the engineering lead, has brought in is like a bit more of a structured OKR system. So we know very granularly each quarter now, especially for next quarter, what are we trying to achieve and what it's going to take to get there. So yeah, very keen to see what the next 12 months takes us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also very keen, and hopefully get a chance to visit you guys down in Melbourne along the same time as some of those announcements may be coming out. So I wanted to now just finish off with the questions I asked every guest. So if you had to live your life following the words of one quote, what would it be?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a quote
Both
in mind.
You guys.
Yeah, I'll go on then. Oh, you got one in mind? Yeah, go for it. I've got a quote of which I don't want to follow and use as a guiding principle. The one who hasn't tasted the grape says it is sour. Just try everything. Be open. He uses this one for me all the time. Whenever I'm like, oh, we shouldn't do that. He who has not tried the grape says it is sour. Yeah, great quote. It's because I'm in quotes and kind of frame against your own life, your own context, your own bias. Try all the grapes. Yeah. Just try all the grapes. See what works for you. Like don't knock it till you try it. Yeah, that's essentially the quote. It's just framed in this somewhat pseudo Latin Roman way. And I think I like it though, just give everything a shot. I feel like I'm lucky enough that I at least have a purpose for now. And that came about through trying a bunch of stuff. So he/she who hasn't tasted the grape says it is sour, and use that as an inverse principle.
Love it. Leo, I think were you about to say a quote as well before?
Oh yeah, I mean it's not a quote, but I guess like a concept that comes to mind. I mean, you heard like the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, like you missed the starting gun. I think a lot of people expect a starting gun in their life to happen where they know like this is it, and very often like it never happens. There's no one with a suit and a ponytail that comes up to you and says, "Kid, you're the next big thing." There's never that moment really. You're just kind of in it. We're all in it right now, and it's just realizing that there's no starting gun. You have to go. Like we're in our lives as we speak. That it needs to be that urgency. I definitely think like between 19 to 22, you end up floating through life. So to me, it would be just always keeping that sense of urgency and not idling is probably the thing that I live life by. Yeah. ASDM grapes.
Yeah.
Taste the grapes actively. Seek the grapes.
Seek the grapes. I love that. For the next one, it might be a little bit similar, but if you could reach everyone in the world for 30 seconds, what would you say?
From a marketing perspective, this is the perfect chance for a 30-second pitch. I would do the greatest marketing campaign of all time and hit 8 billion impressions and pitch fluency 100%. The business would go crazy. I've never met.
Well,
I'm the exact same. But yeah, let's hear yours. Let's hear it. Oh, I didn't have a 30-second pitch ready to go. I'd probably try and squeeze in a little bit about the roadmap as well, because it's a long-term impression. It wouldn't just be process documentation. It would be automations, everything.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you imagine? The website would crash for sure.
Just put everything out there. But yeah, do either of you want to give it a go?
30-second pitch?
Yeah.
Are you going to do the elevator pitch? Yeah, sure.
So 8 billion people, I know all of you work terrible middle office, back office, process-driven lives. You know, you're in there every day grinding them BAU tasks. You know, you sit there 4 hours a day trying to train other people how to do it, how to comply with the ISO certifications. Every step, take a screenshot, draw on the screenshot where to click, write a contextual step. Fluency completely automates that for you. Simply boot up Fluency, start record, do your process, bang, completely finished, beautiful contextually enriched steps, and you're done. And now you can focus on the tasks that really matter, the stuff that made you want to work. You didn't plan this ahead because 8 billion people, how many of them speak English? You need to get coverage for like at least 12 languages, yeah? Japanese.
Yeah.
But
it will auto-translate. That's the magic of it. But yeah, I guess you got to end on taste them grapes as well.
Yeah, taste them grapes. It's crazy how like most people would say something, you know, like love everyone in the world and live a happy life and all that, and we would use it to pitch the B2B SAPs, which is the most important thing in life.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like each of these. Everyone's always got a different thing to say. This is definitely a unique one. I mean, first time having 2 people as well, so I love it. But yeah, one last thing that I usually do is like try to get someone to ask a question to the next guest. But between you guys, I'd like one of you to ask the other person a very challenging question or deep question.
Oh shit! I haven't prepared.
Or it could be a troll question. Anything that comes to mind on it.
Sure. What would it take to change the vision of Fluency as to what? No, like where it's going, the whole thing. Well, even the roadmap. It's not that I would change it. I'm pretty bought in. But I guess as a devil's advocate question, what would it take?
Yeah, I mean, if the market was really shouting at us, like screaming at us,
Please don't do workflow best.
about some feature that we had or like we spoke to someone about the vision. I mean, ultimately, what we're building is for people to buy. It's kind of like irrelevant if we think a vision is good or not. Like the market is the ultimate judge. So I guess to answer your question, Leo, if the market was screaming, then
Invisible head slapped you in the face.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just interesting because I wonder at what point would we know the market is screaming at us? Because obviously there's always going to be that confirmation bias. Like I'm pretty bought into the vision, and I wonder what it would take for me if, you know, people were to say it, you know, because we do have market validation on where we're at, but at every big stage in the roadmap, we basically have to go get that product market fit for those new features. So yeah, I'm curious as to what it would take. I guess we'll know as we get there. We'll know.
Yeah, I love that question. And yeah, just as a final thing, how can people get in contact with the 2 of you if they just wanted to know a little bit more about yourselves and, you know, your mountain biking videos and all that?
Please stay away from the mountain.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, email, go through Brace, whatever. And also, additionally, we're hiring a full stack or back-end developer. So if anybody's keen to work with us at the Fluency team down in Melbourne, please reach out. Even for anything, like
If you do want to reach out and, if you're not a full stack engineer and you got some sort of role that, isn't advertised, always reach out. We're looking to make connections with people in the space. And like you said about ecosystem, connect with other people in the space. If you have a startup and you're kind of on the same journey, we're always looking to, meet with other founders and stuff like that to share war stories and lessons, pitfalls before we run into them. So to reach out. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put it in the show notes, and thank you so much, guys, for
Nice.
coming on.
Thanks for having us.
thank you so much, Brad.